Oxid's coming up eventually, but I completed this game a while ago, so let's cover it first, shall we? Oceanbound, released in 1998, made by Richard White and published by Spiderweb Software. If you're an old Macintosh gamer, especially an RPG fan, you've probably heard of Spiderweb Software already. Though considering Richard White's games don't seem to be on Spiderweb's website anymore, maybe you haven't heard of this one. I might get to the rest at some point. Nethergate, Exile, Avarnum, Avedon, and Geneforge. I'm not much of an RPG fan, but I did play a demo of Geneforge way back in my childhood, and I remember wanting to play more because the setting was interesting. Though that's a story for another day because that'll definitely be a longer video. For someone who currently has less free time, Oceanbound's a better place to start on Spiderweb Software's large catalog of games, so hey, let's get started. At its basic level, Oceanbound is a strategy game, and the story is that you and your crew are shipwrecked on an island, which the game tells you a little detailed story about. Your goal is to build some quick dwellings, grow food, and gather enough wood to build yourself a boat and get off the island, while making sure your population doesn't succumb to starvation, wild animals, or attacks from natives, starting with the wood from your broken ship and the rations you had with you. You'll pretty much never worry about wild animals, though, because the very first structure you build in every level is a house, and everything else you build has to connect to it. As long as you build one house for every 10 people you have, no wild animals ever pick anyone off. You also need storehouses to store any food you grow. A large part of strategy is figuring out where to start your little settlement, especially on later maps. Starting off in the wrong spot can mess up your entire game. In general, you want easy access to fertile land, trees, and of course, water. You know, because you must build a boat. Wait, that's a different game. Guess I can reference obscure modern games too, would you look at that? It's also best to build on land that's unusable for anything else, like gorse flax or sand. You don't want to waste farmland or trees, especially on later maps where both can be at a premium. Managing these resources is the most important strategy of this game. Theoretically, you have an unlimited amount of time to build your boat, but the diminishing yields of each piece of arable land limits the total time each island is survivable. After all, you're running a community of sailors, not horticulturalists. What, the game's doing the job of explaining this for me. Trees do grow back, but they do so very slowly. Heck, you have to let trees grow back on some levels. Those are interesting. Yeah, there's actually not a huge amount to talk about with this game. The mechanics are pretty simple, and some of the new mechanics Oceanbound introduces that sound like they would be interesting are actually really simple. Graveyards aren't actually haunted or anything, your crew is just superstitious and won't build over them, so they're like a reskinned wetlands. As for natives, they do require a garrison if you want to work anywhere near them without massive risk of casualties, but for most levels, it's actually not much of an issue. You can just not go anywhere near them. There's not even too much to micromanage. There's two main jobs that people do, and once wood is allocated to build the boat, I guess everyone just helps with that in their off time. It's a simple game, and that's sort of its weak point. It's fun in little bursts, but for the most part, it's not all that challenging. If you play this in a marathon like I did, it can actually get rather draining. At least the designers seem to have fun with the levels. Many of the levels have some interesting designs or are based off of existing countries, continents, or logos, including a level which is a giant Apple logo. It really does have that 90s shareware vibe, doesn't it? If only it came with a level editor. The visuals and sound are rather simple as well. There's very short little sounds for each action, and the background sounds are birds chirping and cawing and water splashing up against a shoreline. If there were some more varied sounds, they'd probably be fine, but as they are, you'll probably turn them off after a while. I sound like I'm being hard on Oceanbound, but it does actually do a relatively good job of having levels make you use certain things to teach you about them, like the second level basically requiring you to use bridges. It's rare for me to see a game that manages to teach you semi-organically without a blunt tutorial. You can also shift-click on basically any element of the game to get info on it, which is also neat. It won't lose you at all, I can guarantee that much. I do have to wonder... Ah, jeez! That sounds like when someone in the Oregon Trail dies! That is not a good victory sound. Anyways, I do have to wonder why you keep having to escape island after island after island. There's 60 levels to this game, and according to the time passing by over there, it takes at least 7 years to complete each level. For maps with scarce wood, it can take longer. So that's at least 420 years spent escaping from islands, which is just ridiculous. Though, maybe it's not supposed to be all continuous. Each one is a different amount of people and starts you with different resources, so maybe each one is just a different scenario you're supposed to survive. Or maybe not. Apparently even the game lampshades just how silly this all is. You guys hardly need me here. The game's little epilogue here even references another one of Richard White's games, Rock Solid, while it suggests that maybe you should be put in charge of diamond mines rather than sailing anything ever again. One major complaint I have is that you're required to use the screen edges to scroll the levels, and there's no option to use, say, the arrow keys, though this is much less irritating on actual hardware than in an emulator. Save files also only save what level you're on and not in the in-level progress, but the levels are all short enough, somewhere around 20 minutes each, that it really isn't a big deal. In short, this one's an old curiosity tied to a rather large Macintosh publisher and developer, but I can't find too many reasons to recommend it. Not to say it's bad, but it's nothing spectacular either. It's just there. You'll have to get this through the garden, as Spiderweb Software doesn't even sell Richard White's games anymore. As far as I can gather, they only ever acted as a publisher in this case. Now that I've gotten off those islands, maybe I can get to Oxid. Or maybe I'll end up covering another game about being shipwrecked. Either way, until next time.